Welcome back to module 4.2. Let's continue. Electrochemical cells. Remember in the definition of electrochemistry, I told you it has two parts. The spontaneous reaction is electrochemical cells, and where we now use electrical energy, to cause reactions is electrolytic cells. So we're looking at electrochemical cells. We'll look at electrochemical cells. We'll look at voltaic cells. Voltaic cell is an example of electrochemical cell. We'll look at diagram of Daniel cell. Daniel cell is an electrochemical cell. We'll look at what is happening in the Daniel cell. Then look at reversibility of reactions, and we'll conclude. Electrochemical cells. The reaction that occurs in electrochemical cell is such that electrons are taken up at one electrode and released at the other, and current results. So we'll see the diagram and we'll explain very well. The reaction consists of two parts: an oxidation reaction at the anode where electrons are given up, and a reduction reaction at the cathode where electrons are used up. An electrochemical cell is a device for keeping the oxidation and reduction parts of the reaction separated so that the current may be used to perform useful work. Now it is clearer for us. We can see definition. Anode is electrode at which oxidation half reaction occurs. Cathode is electrode at which reduction half reaction occurs. The electron released at the anode flow through the external circuit to the cathode. A very good example of electrochemical cell is the Daniel cell, which we are going to look at. Now in this electrochemical cell, there will be spontaneous chemical reactions, and they are called voltaic or galvanic cells. Remember when we talked about volta and galvani, when we talked about voltaic pile, and then talked about animal electricity, that is galvanism, because of these two gentlemen who first worked on this. Therefore, the following convention for the electrode should be noted. The cathode is the electrode at which reduction occurs. The cathode is negative in electrolytic cells and positive in voltaic cells. Remember, electrochemical cells are like opposite of electrolytic cells. In electrochemical cells, there is spontaneous chemical reaction which produces the current. But in electrolytic cells, we now use an external power to cause that reaction. So it's kind of in reverse. We'll also see what happens when we look at reversibility of reactions or reversibility of cells. Now the anode is the cathode at which oxidation occurs. The anode is positive in electrolytic cells and negative in voltaic cells. So when we have two dissimilar metal bars such as iron and copper placed in a solution of H2SO4, now this H2SO4 is electrolyte, and if a wire is connected between the two metals, as in voltaic or galvanic cell, because of, like I said, volta and galvani, these people who are the first who worked on these kind of cells. Now, voltaic cell, we are going to see a good example of the voltaic cell, the Daniel cell, which is made up of zinc in zinc sulfate electrolyte, and then copper electrode in copper sulfate electrolyte. Now, the two solutions are separated by a salt bridge. Sometimes it can be a porous partition. The reason for the salt bridge or porous partition is for maintenance of charge balance in the two separate half reactions. We call them half reactions: oxidation half reaction and reduction half reaction. So a potential difference exists between the two electrodes, and current flows in the external circuit through the wire. This current is produced by dissolution of zinc. Look at the exact thing that happens. Zinc metal would be oxidized to zinc 2+, and 2 electrons will be given off in equation 1. Now copper ions in solution, Cu2+ in solution, will accept these 2 electrons and be reduced to Cu metal. That is equation 2. Now when we combine the two equations, we will get equation 3. Of course, the two electrons cancelling out from the opposite, both sides of the equation. So as a result, the zinc will be oxidized while the copper will be reduced. And that will give us this last equation. And it is this flow of electron in the external circuit that constitutes the current in the voltaic cells. Well, a very good example of voltaic cell, like we said, is the Daniell cell. Now look at it properly. You see the zinc electrode dipping in zinc sulfate solution. You can see that. Now on the right side, we see copper sulfate solution and copper electrode dipping in copper sulfate solution. Now these two are connected together. Remember that the zinc will be oxidized, giving off electrons in the left-hand side here, and the electron will flow through the external circuit. You see the arrow where the electron is flowing into the right-hand electrode. And the right-hand electrode, where we have copper, receiving these electrons, the copper ions in solution will be oxidized, will be reduced to copper metal. And that copper metal will be, plated on this copper electrode. Now, in order to maintain charge balance, remember that as the zinc is dissolved, the zinc metal is dissolving here, becoming zinc 2 plus by oxidation. Now, there will be a kind of excess of zinc ion in the left-hand side. Right? I hope you're following. There will be excess of zinc ion on this left-hand side because zinc metal is continuously dissolving, giving off 2 electrons, which is, the flow of this current. There will be an excess of zinc ions here. Now look at it. The salt bridge, there will be a connection between the two. This salt bridge will now allow the zinc ions. There are 2 ways that can happen. Allow the zinc ions to migrate into the right-hand electrode. Now also, as the copper sulfate in this solution, the Cu2 plus ions will continuously be reduced to copper metal, which is placed here. Automatically, we will have an excess of copper sulfate, which will now be allowed to migrate to the left-hand cell. Now, by so doing, we'll maintain a charge balance. On the other hand, this salt bridge can contain potassium chloride, another electrolyte, potassium chloride, potassium nitrate, which will ionize to give potassium and nitrate ions, or potassium and chloride ions, whichever is used. Now, these potassium ions and chloride ions will also be allowed to go into the half cells to maintain these excess charges, by then maintaining charge balance. And this Daniell cell works in this way. I've decided to, import a diagram of this Daniell cell from Wikipedia so that it becomes easy for us to understand this explanation. There are different types. It can be, like I said, a porous partition where you have only one cell. Then you just have a porous partition in between the cells, keeping the oxidation and reduction, half cells separately. Now, all these things we have said is what we're trying to write down here. So you can see in the Daniell cell, okay, the first we have said that the migration of those ions formed from the ionization, across the salt bridge serve to maintain charge balance. In the Daniell cell, electrons flow from the zinc to the copper electrode in the outer circuit, which you saw. Now, an EMF due to external flow of electrons from left-hand side to right-hand side is known as positive EMF. EMF due to 1 molar solution is approximately 1.1 volts for the Daniell cell. I think we'll see where we calculated that, knowing the equation for EMF, which we'll also see later. The term standard is used to express the concentrations of the solutions as 1 molar. So when the concentrations, we'll see that also, when the concentrations are 1 molar, temperature is room temperature, which we use at 25 degrees C or 298 Kelvin, and pressure of 1 atmosphere, the EMF we'll call that standard EMF. We'll come to that, and also we know when it is non-standard. We'll see that in subsequent modules. The EMF of the cell is equal to the potential difference in volts between the two electrodes. Any conductor using external circuit connecting the two electrodes has a property of resistance to the electron flow, and this is Ohm. It's called Ohm. And of course, we are going to look at Ohm's law and see how we define this resistance we're talking about. In this slide, we're trying to look at reversibility of cells. So we can use the Daniell cell. Remember, the Daniell cell works by oxidizing zinc, releasing electrons which now go to the copper electrode and reduce the copper. So automatically what this means is that if we reverse the Daniell cell, for instance, we will now have equation 4 and equation 5. Look at it. Zinc ions will now be reduced and copper will now be oxidized. Now let us critically examine this. In the Daniell cell, the tendency for reaction 4 to occur is greater than the tendency for copper to be oxidized. That is equation 5. This is because electrons flow from zinc to copper. The magnitude of the EMF developed is a measure of relative tendencies of the two reactions in equations 4 and 5. Also, EMF varies with zinc ion concentration and copper ion concentration in two solutions. We will also have what we call concentration cells, which we might look at if time permits. So high zinc ion concentration decreases the reaction equation, that is this, and favors the reactions of that is copper going into copper 2 ions. So we're trying to show that a cell can be reversed. Of course, when we look at spontaneity in terms of Gibbs free energy, we will now use the Gibbs free energy and of course the electrochemical series to know which one is possible to be reversed. If you reverse it, can it be spontaneous? If it is not spontaneous, then it means you have to have an input of energy before you can achieve that reaction. Automatically, you are now moving away from electrochemical cells to electrolytic cells. Of this module. In this module, we have looked at electrochemical cells, which we call voltaic cells, and a very good example is the Daniell cell, which we looked at the working of the Daniell cell, and we also looked at reversibility of cells, possibility of reversing cells. Are we going to still achieve the same thing? I thank you so much for listening and expect to see you in the next class. Thank you very much.